Chapter 6. It poured all weekend, raining out the sack of Rome which Nathan had intended to shoot, weather permitting. At the last minute, the crew put a large tarpaulin over the Eternal City, and according to a contingency plan, Nathan filmed the St. Valentine's Day Massacre and some other interior shots in a warehouse in the Bronx. Once again, Simon didn't make the cast, but it was just as well, as the large part of his weekend was devoted to concepts of cyclical symbolism at his report. He didn't understand the book, or even its title, so his 5 pages were a little confused, but this was a plus, he was assured by Sam, who had had Mr. Dunham before. Interflux stood to lose money every day, paying stopped work crews to sit around and look at bad neighbor signs. With Cyril Irving in a rabid mood, his people scrambled to gather information on the mysterious Interflux without results. I, Simon, had literally disappeared off the face of the earth. There was a 24-hour watch on the land, but the stakeouts reported that the only people who even went near there were a fat couple who held hands and sang, and sometimes a crazy lady with a lawn chair. The fence, flimsy as it was, held firm. The signs had been all but destroyed by the weekend weather, but the message remained clear. The land belonged to Interflux, and Interflux was a bad neighbor. So Mr. Irving sent for the mayor, one Fred Van Doren, a distant relative of the Schuyler family. Interflux's message was, "We put the green in Greenbush," and Van Doren agreed so completely that he all but saluted upon entering the office of the senior executive vice president. He didn't protest at all when he was told that it was the town's responsibility to get Interflux out of this mess. Mr. Van Doren was then told what his opinions were. He found it unacceptable that Interflux had not properly identified themselves thus far by using the address of a school and the name of a person who couldn't be found. This made them a risk. Therefore, the town would give Interflux 1 week to identify themselves properly, or else the purchase would be invalidated. Mr. Van Doren also found out that he was going to announce this in newspaper ads. Van Doren, who was not noted for his deep thinking, proclaimed that this was exactly what he had been planning to do anyway, and took himself off to carry it out. When the town announcement hit the papers, Phil was still in the middle of his latest crisis, and Simon was just scratching the surface on a possible crisis of his own. Mr. Monagle had handed back the art history exam, and there it was, 11 out of 60. He had given the teacher one of the few good laughs in an essentially humorless course when he looked at his paper and asked, "Is there going to be a bell curve?" Luckily, Mr. Monagle assured them there was no problem at all, so there was no need for Simon to seek out TC, who was busy anyway, combing the school for a new department which he could place Phil. "First poetry and now this," said Phil, throwing his copy of The Sun on the floor and stomping on the town's notice. "This is not doing much for my faith, you know!" Simon could not take his eyes off the town's advertisement. Notice to person or persons responsible for purchasing Greenbush Land Lot 1346B under pseudonym Interflux. The message was from the mayor, but Simon knew that the style was all Cyril Irving. Clever guy, Cyril Irving, leaves nothing to chance. Simon was disgusted. After catching the Interflux blunder, pouncing on the land, and camouflaging himself so beautifully in the process, already the whole plan had hit a snag. Now he had to show himself to keep the land, in which case his father would see that his own son was the chief ant at the Interflux picnic and kill him. To make matters worse, he couldn't talk to anyone about it because he'd have to admit his father's identity. Any normal person who found out that the father of Interflux was really the son of Interflux couldn't be blamed for saying, "Stay away from this guy, he's crazy." He needed time to think. "What do you mean, think?" howled Phil. "What's there to think? They're gonna take away our land. Let's go down there right now and tell them, here we are, we're Interflux. Big deal, we can own land, it's a free country." Even Sam was beginning to lose his cool a little. "Simon, you've got no choice. No land, no Interflux, which you may remember is the only thing keeping Wendy from selling you out. And even then, there's the little matter of the $6,700 that you can't get back unless you show yourself. And the land will be gone too, added Phil, who was just getting used to the idea of being a man of property. So what we do is this. We write the town a letter saying we're Interflux, they can send all their tax bills and notices here, we apologize for any confusion, blah blah blah, but we own the land and you want to make something out of it? That kind of attitude got you booted out of poetry, Sam pointed out. It wasn't that at all, it was Miss Hotchkiss. She hated me. So how about it, Simon? I need time to think, Simon insisted. The evening was lousy. It was a good thing Simon was left out of Nathan's filming of the rescheduled sack of Rome because he was far too preoccupied to perform. A little after 9, he was lying on his bed counting his options to a grand total of 0 and ignoring his open art history textbook, which was, if possible, even more boring than Mr. Monagle's lectures. A sound penetrated the fog of his thoughts, the sound of a Panzer tank navigating this quiet Fosterville street. He jumped up and ran to the window. Sam Stavrinidis was parking the wreck in the large circular driveway, waiting patiently through 45 seconds of run-on, during which time a massive blue cloud settled over the carefully kept chrysanthemums like nerve gas. Simon heard the doorbell and his mother answering it. Then she was down the hall tapping on his bedroom door. "Simon, there's someone here to see you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And he's gorgeous." Yeah, Mom, I know. "I found your address in the phone book," Sam explained. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," said Mrs. Irving. "We're happy to have you. We move around so much that it's nice to see Simon is making friends." "Yeah, right," said Simon. "Come on in, Sam." The two settled themselves in Simon's room, and Mrs. Irving went back to reading The Sun. "I just came from the sack of Rome," said Sam. "Offense 10, defense no score." Simon smiled vaguely. "Listen, Simon, we'll get right to the point. I was listening to the news in the wreck on my way home. They were talking about the Interflux expansion, and it came up that the name of the top man at Interflux is Mr. Irving. Tell me, has this got anything to do with why you're so dead set against identifying ourselves on the land?" Simon stood up. "Okay, he's my father. You're looking at the son of Interflux. Pure and simple, you may now go ahead and hate my guts." Sam just shook his head. "I don't get it. Why Antiflux? What have you got against your dad?" Simon looked surprised. "Nothing. He's a great father. We have a good time together. We play basketball. We laugh a lot. We sneak food when my mother goes on a health kick. He's a really nice guy." "Seems to me that Antiflux is a pretty rotten thing to do to a nice guy." Simon shook his head. "You don't understand. My father is terrific. Interflux I'm not too thrilled about. All my life I've lived breathing Interflux air, eating Interflux food, wearing Interflux clothes, and hearing about the great future I have guess where. The last town I lived in, my friends all turned against me when they found out I was the son of Interflux. That's okay. If they're that shallow, I don't want to know them either. But the bottom line is I'm interested in painting and art. I don't want to have anything to do with Interflux." "So you're in painting school. What are you complaining about?" "It just gets to you after a while. Look at this house. All the ashtrays say eggs on because Interflux makes splash guards for gas pumps. All our luggage comes from Pan Am's special offer because of this 2.5-inch metal doohickey that Interflux makes that no airplane washroom can be without. Every cup, saucer, dish, and bowl in our kitchen is from a free giveaway by some company that Interflux makes a tiny piece of junk for." Impulsively, Sam dashed into his closet and emerged with an enormous carton filled with small toys. "See this? All from Snappy Wappies. I've never eaten a Snappy Wappy in my life. Well, you're a little boy, Mr. Irving, because your company manufactures some dumb little gear wheel for the machine that makes the box tops easy to tear off, so some other poor kid can end up saddled with kazoos, secret rings, 3D animal pictures, 2-dimensional plastic dinosaurs, football cards, x-ray glasses, onion-flavored chewing gum, and other stuff like that." "Sam, I've never been in a town where Interflux wasn't throwing his muscle around. And this time I saw a weak spot and I went for it." Sam nodded. "The original, stupid, impulsive, harebrained idea. And that's the story. Take it or leave it." Sam looked thoughtful. "Well, one stupid idea deserves another. What say we write the town a letter and identify ourselves and leave you out of it? But I bought the land, as I, Simon. How do we explain it? Why do we have to? We send them a copy of the deed to show that we're on the level, tell them the land is owned by the student council, and ignore I, Simon. Who signs this letter? Simon asked, beginning to come alive. How about Wendy? She's student council president. Wendy! Simon exploded, his newly formed options vanishing before his eyes like soap bubbles. Wendy wouldn't give us the skin off a grape! We'll threaten her with unpopularity. If she loses us this land, her name is mud at Nassau Arts. A lot of kids are really psyched about this, and they want to know what we're doing about these town notices. And you'd be willing to do this for me? Simon asked, toying with the possibility that Interflux was alive and well and willing to fight another day. Sam grinned, and Simon noticed that his teeth were perfect too. Well, if you think we shouldn't, we can always pack you a lunch and leave you in the crossfire. No, said Sam quickly. Let's do it. Thanks a lot. Anytime. Now, I think we should keep your Interflux connection a secret around the school. But we're gonna have to tell Philip, and I figure we might as well get that out of the way right now. They found Phil setting up the Baldwin spare room, preparing for TC's arrival on Wednesday. Phil was now a bona fide photography student after one of the most difficult negotiations in TC's career. Expert wheeling and dealing and the raw potential Phil demonstrated at the interview got the job done. Such a large service would ordinarily incur a stay of 10 to 12 days, but TC let the Baldwins off with only 8, explaining that Phil was great for his reputation. Sam sat Phil down, gave him a milkshake as a pacifier, and told him that it was a new development that might take some getting used to. Simon's dad is the senior vice president of Interflux. Phil choked. Wow, really? Just pay attention, Phil. Here's the story. With much prompting from Simon, Sam managed to make the situation reasonably clear to Phil. So we're going to write the letter and keep the land? Right, said Sam. We just leave Simon out of it, and Wendy signs as student council president. Well, I still have my doubts about that, said Simon. I think it's an accomplishment that she isn't beating me up anymore. I can't envision her doing us any favors. No, that part doesn't bother me too much, said Phil. Worst comes to worst, we'll tie her to the back of the wreck and run her up and down the LI Expressway a few times. You and what army? Simon challenged. One more thing, said Sam. We don't tell anyone about Simon's family. Good idea, Phil agreed. You know, this whole thing just gets cooler with each new development. I mean, first Interflux in the land, and suddenly his dad's Interflux. He really likes his dad. We still fight the company. It's got emotional conflict, excitement, and strategy. We make a move, they make a counter move. This is just great. Simon, you are truly one awesome human being. Thanks, said Sam with a strange grin. Mark my words, there are glorious days ahead, Phil prophesied. Life gets so dull sometimes, you can forget things can be this good. A little stability is a small price to pay for this kind of excitement. Hold on a minute there, said Sam. Let's get this straight right now. We're not trying to make life exciting for you. A lot of stupid things have been done for whatever reason, and now we have to do some even stupider ones to stay afloat, so try to restrain your thrills. We're writing this letter not because we want to make trouble, but because we need the peace and quiet to try and figure out how we're going to get out of this. If we got the chance, we'd be crazy not to give Interflux its land, give Wendy back her party money, and go home happy not having to worry about tomorrow. I don't care if Interflux puts up a slaughterhouse on Nassau Arts' front lawn. At least when I go to sleep at night, I'll know that no one's plotting against me, whether it's the world's largest corporation, the world's angriest dancer, or someone I haven't even thought of yet. Well, said Phil, either way we've got to write that letter. Dear Mr. Mayor, the organization Interflux that lawfully purchased land lot 1346B and has lawfully fenced same is a subsidiary of the Student Council Program Board of the Nassau County High School for Visual, Literary, and Performing Arts. Any communication you may wish to make regarding this property can therefore be sent to the school's address in care of the program board. You can be assured that we will respond to any lawful request made by the town of Greenbush and pay all taxes promptly. Enclosed is a photocopy of the lawful title deed to land lot 1346B as proof of our lawful ownership. Yours very truly, Interflux, per Wendy Orr, Student Council President. Wendy looked up. You want me to sign this? Sam and Phil nodded. Barbara gazed at Sam. Simon shuffled. Wendy smiled diabolically. Read my lips. Now! But Wendy, Phil began. No! Wendy repeated. Negative, you get it. Put out the light, pull the chain, shut the door, now! Predictably, Barbara had nothing to add. Simon had expected Wendy's reaction, but had never believed her refusal could become her so well. Well, okay, said Sam indifferently. I guess we better go tell everyone that we've lost the land. Wendy stopped short. What do you mean, everyone? The whole school. Practically everyone's interested to see how this turns out. Land belongs to all of us, you know. They'd be pretty upset when they find out that one little signature would have made the difference. I won't sign it, she said less certainly. Oh, we understand, said Sam sympathetically, his dejection apparent. After all, if one person should have the power to dynamite something for the whole school, it may as well be the student council president. They probably won't blame you. Most of them. Mainly. You're putting it all on my shoulders! Wendy exploded. Of course not, said Sam innocently. Though a few people might get that impression, since you're the only one who could have signed, but you wouldn't. What about him? Wendy explained, pointing at Simon, spitting out the syllable him as though it tasted like vitriol. He bought this dumb land, why doesn't he sign? You're the president, Sam explained. When the mayor sees your name, he'll know that you speak for all 1,500 students. You've been involved in community activities before. Sure, we'd be all more than happy to sign, but who stamps Sam Stavrinidis? When they see Wendy Orr, they'll know we're on the level. But you're not on the level! This is the slimiest thing I've ever seen, and now I've got to endorse it because if I don't, you're gonna tell everyone it was me who earned everything. I would never dream of doing such a thing, said Sam, his expression open and sincere. I believe you, blurted Barbara spontaneously, catching all three boys off guard. None of them had ever heard her say anything except in answer to a direct question. Wendy groaned. Outrageous! Why do I have to take the rap alone? If I sign, why shouldn't the sleazebag sign too? Sam had no immediate reply, so Phil announced, for an undisclosed reason, that's why. You're quite right, said Sam quickly. Your signature should be countersigned by no fewer than 2 members of the program board. I don't want you to thinking we're not fair. You don't know the meaning of the word, said Wendy acidly. So it was that the town letter, delivered by special messenger to the town hall, was signed by Wendy Orr and countersigned by Philip Baldwin and Sam Stavrinidis. Interflux was now out in the open.